In the early hours of June 6, 1944, inside overcrowded ships rocking in the English Channel, there was a kind of silence that only exists when everyone is afraid. But no one wants to be the first to admit it. Young Americans held their helmets, folded letters and small photographs, trying to act like grown men. Some had left farms behind, others had walked away from factory jobs. Many had said goodbye to mothers who pretended to be strong. They knew they were going ashore. What they didn't know was how deeply the war would continue to live inside them afterward. The simple truth is this: the army trained these men to fight, but no one can train a man for the first minute of D-Day. On paper, on maps, everything looked controlled. The plan had names, schedules, arrows, clear objectives. America had ships, planes, and an industry that seemed limitless. But when the ramp drops and the air turns to metal, industry doesn't protect you. Your country feels far away. It's just you, your body, and the next decision. When the ramps open, many learn something immediately. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is functioning despite it. German machine guns didn't just fire, they swept. They cut through water, steel, and men. Bodies fell before some soldiers could even take a step. There was no cinematic heroism, no dramatic speeches, only chaos, shock, and survival in its rawest form. What many of those young men didn't know was how exposed they would be in the first moments. Their gear was heavy, the water pulled at them, and exhaustion had already set in from sickness and tension. Some couldn't swim well. Others carried too much because that's what they were told to do. War doesn't care about what's correct. It cares about what happens. The plans had been designed for one scenario. The ocean had another. Currents pushed units far from their intended landing points. Officers were killed early. Groups mixed together. Chains of command disappeared. And this is where the story becomes larger than strategy. In many places, leadership emerged where no one expected it. A soldier who had been just another man became the voice saying, "Forward." Moments like that forge a generation by force. And while all of this was happening, they weren't thinking about politics. They weren't thinking about speeches or headlines. They were thinking about the man beside them. Real patriotism isn't a slogan. Real patriotism is standing up because someone has to stand up. It's moving forward because stopping gets you killed and gets others killed too. It's seeing the flag not as a distant symbol, but as home itself. Another uncomfortable truth is this: many soldiers didn't know exactly where they were. It sounds impossible, but it was real. Smoke, noise, screams, water, explosions. You lose reference. You lose time. You lose the sense of a plan. And still, they advanced. Not out of blind confidence, but out of discipline and survival instinct. American discipline wasn't pretty. It was necessary. Many people watching today recognize this in their own families. Veterans came home and didn't talk. Not because they lacked pride, but because they didn't want to place those images inside their children's minds. D-Day didn't end when the day ended. It returned in dreams. It returned in silence at the dinner table. It returned as irritation at loud noises. It returned in waking up too early, with no explanation. And yet, they worked, raised families, and moved forward. And here is the point many miss. Despite the chaos, fear, and failures, the mission worked. Not because it was perfect, but because it was relentless, because men refused to stay down. Every yard gained was paid for at a terrible cost. That beach, calm today, was one of the most violent places in modern history. And it was there that the path to liberate Western Europe was opened. Decades later, D-Day is often remembered as a military milestone. But for the men who were there, it was a collection of impossible moments survived one by one. Many fathers and grandfathers never fully explained what they experienced, not because they lacked pride, but because some memories resist words. What they knew without question was simple. America called, and they answered, even without knowing everything. even without guarantees, even with fear. That quiet commitment carried by ordinary men in extraordinary circumstances changed the course of the war and shaped the generation that would rebuild the country afterward. After D-Day, many believed the worst was over. That belief didn't last long. For the American soldiers who made it off the beach alive, the war simply changed shape. The sand and the sea were replaced by narrow roads, hedgerows, and villages that felt too quiet to be safe. Every field looked peaceful until it wasn't. Europe would not be liberated in a single push, but inch by inch, paid for with lives. American soldiers quickly learned that survival now meant patience. Long hours of waiting, constant tension, sleepless nights. The enemy wasn't always in front of them. Sometimes it was hidden in a barn, a window, a tree line along a road that had seemed safe just minutes earlier. Many men who survived D-Day were killed days later in places that would never make it into history books. As they advanced, soldiers began to see the human cost of the war more clearly. Destroyed towns, civilians living in fear, children without food. For many Americans, this confirmed why they were there. They were not just defeating an enemy army, they were ending a system that had crushed an entire continent. That realization gave purpose to the sacrifice, even if it didn't make it easier. Loss became constant. At first, every death hit hard. Over time, silence became a form of protection. Some soldiers stopped asking new names, others avoided getting close. It wasn't coldness, it was emotional survival. War taught them brutally that attachment could be taken away without warning. When victory finally came into view, it didn't feel like celebration. It felt like exhaustion. Relief, yes, but quiet relief. Many American soldiers were alive, but they were no longer the same men who had landed months earlier. They had done what was asked of them. But no one walks away unchanged from something like that, even when the outcome is victory. Coming home was fast and strange. One day they were surrounded by ruins. The next, they were greeted by flags, parades, and applause. America welcomed its heroes. But few people knew how to ask what they had really been through, and many veterans didn't know how to explain it, or whether they even should. They went back to work, they built families, they helped create the post-war America, factories, highways, neighborhoods, stability. But inside many of them, the war continued quietly, not as stories told, but as habits, as rigidity, as restless nights, as a lifelong difficulty putting certain feelings into words. For those watching today, these marks are not abstract. They live in family memory, in the grandfather who disliked loud noises, in the father who rarely spoke about the past, in the silence that filled the room when certain topics came up. The war crossed generations, even when no one talked about it openly. The patriotism of these men was never about speeches or slogans. It was about consistency, about doing what had to be done when turning back would have been easier. They didn't fight for recognition. They fought because they believed it was their duty at that moment in history. That sense of duty shaped not only the end of the war, but the character of an entire generation. Today, it's easy to reduce World War II to dates, battles, and maps. But the real legacy lives in the men who came home and built the world their children grew up in. Understanding what they carried in silence is a way of honoring not just the victory, but the human cost that came with it. The war officially ended in 1945. For many American soldiers, it never truly ended. Still, it was this generation, shaped by pressure, loss, and sacrifice, that helped create decades of stability. And that is why telling these stories with honesty and respect still matters, especially to those who grew up in their shadow.